Hello friends, this is Terry from Uncle Terry's Beginner Guitar. Today we're going to talk about seventh chords. Now, we learn to play guitar, we look at little chord diagrams, and we learn what a G7 looks like. We know how to play a G7 chord. We know what a C, and we know what a C7 chord shape is. But let's talk today about why those are seventh chords. What makes it a seventh chord when you add your little finger there to that C chord, or you go down to the first fret to make that G7? Why is that a seventh chord, and what is a seventh chord? Well, a seventh chord has the addition of a note compared to its just typical major chord, and the note that it adds is a flattened seventh. Now, there are several types of seventh chords if you really get into the music theory of it, but when we say a seventh chord, not otherwise specified, then what we're talking about is what's called a dominant seventh, and that's just where the seventh note in the scale is flattened a half step. So let's review just briefly, and we'll go through some examples. What makes a major chord a major chord? Well, each major chord, it takes 3 notes to make a full chord, and the notes that it takes is the first, third, and fifth note in that chord scale. So for example, in a G, you always have the root, a G chord, the root would be G, and we'll call that number 1, the first note in the scale. And then you have the third and the fifth. So with a G scale, it's G, A, B. So B is the third. So there's a B in the G chord, and then C would be the fourth note, and D would be the fifth. So in a G chord, you got your first with that G note there on the E string. You got the second note in the scale, the third, which is a B. And then you got your open D, your fourth string. And then chords can add, duplicate the notes if you want. So when you play a G chord, you're playing G, B, D, and then you got another G, and you got another B, the open B string, and then you got another G note here. So that's a G. So when we play a G7th, we're going to play the 7th note in the scale, and we're going to drop it down a half step, which is 1 fret on the guitar. So G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, and F is 7. So usually in the key of G, the F is an F sharp, but we're going to play it as F natural. So that's why that chord is a G7th, because we have that flattened 7th note in the scale, which is F. Now let's talk about A. The key of A, we all learned that if we just lift up our middle finger then that's an A seventh. We can play it this way, but that G note is now open because the seventh note in an A scale is a G sharp, and we're going to drop that down a half step to G. So we've turned an A into an A seventh because that note that we leave open is a G, and that's the flattened seventh note in the scale. And you probably also learned to play A seventh this way, and that's okay because that adds our G up here on the E string, 3rd fret. So that would be A seventh also. Let's do C. We have our C chord, and we add our little finger to the 3rd fret on the G string. And everyone knows that's a C7. Why is that a C7? Because we have flattened the 7th note in the scale of the key of C. So that the 7th note would be a B, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B. But we're going to flatten that by a half step, and it's a B flat. And this note right here on the G string is a B flat because open, it's a G. 1st fret would be G sharp or A flat. 2nd fret would be the A note. And the 3rd fret would be the B flat note. So this chord is a C7th, and that is the reason it's the C7th, because you're hitting the flattened 7th note in the scale, which is B flat. All right, let's do one more. Let's do E. We all learned the cowboy E, and if we put our little finger on the B string 3rd fret, that makes E7. And why is that E7? Well, again, you got the 7th note in the scale of E would be E flat or D sharp, and we're going to move that down a half step, and then it would be a D note. So we're adding a D note to the E chord by putting our little finger on that D note right there on the B string. And that makes an E7. So that is what makes a 7th chord a 7th chord. Now, why use 7th chords? Well, the 7th gives it a little bit of dissonance, a little bit of tension. And that's what music is all about, right? You raise the tension, and then you release the tension, and raise it, release it. It makes it interesting. It makes it flow along. So a lot of times in popular music, country, folk, rock and roll, blues, the 7th is added to give it a little dissonance and indicate that we're about to change to something else. We're about to change chords. So let's do an example. Let's do Bob Dylan's song, I'll Be Your Baby Tonight. Close your eyes, close the door. 7th, you don't have to worry playing the D chord anymore. 'Cause I'll be your baby tonight. So that 7th gives a little dissonance there, kind of raises the tension as we move to the chord change. So that's one way that the seventh chord is used. Another example might be the old standard song, 9-Pound Hammer in key of G. Let's do it without the seventh, and then we'll add the seventh and show how it changes the feel of the song. Well, a 9-pound hammer, just a little too heavy for my size, but it for my size. All right, so that's without the seventh chords. Now, it adds some interest if you add the sevenths in there. Well, the 9-pound hammer, just a little too heavy for my size, but it for my size. So, right before the chord change, adding those sevenths kind of raises the tension a little bit and makes it interesting. Another way that sevenths are used, especially in blues music, is to finish off a song. So let's say we're playing something in the key of E. Let's say we're playing I Hear That Train A-Comin', Folsom Prison Blues, and we're playing along. I hear that train a-comin', coming around the bend, blah, blah, blah. We go through the whole song, and then we finish it up with a little lick like this. And then it ends on the seventh. So it leaves you with a little bit of dissonance there that's interesting at the end of the song. And that's a good use of the seventh chord to finish it up. Some songs, the entire song is played with sevenths. A lot of jazzy tunes will be in seventh chords for the entire song. So this is a way to play G7. This is bar chord G. Everyone knows bar chord G. And if you lift your little finger off, then you've got G7. That's a way to play G7. Drinking beer in a cabaret, was I having fun? And then we're playing D7th. This is a way to play D7th. It's like a C shape with your little finger on that G string there. So we're playing sevenths the whole time, and the whole song, it gives a little more dissonance and tension too. So it's a jazzy kind of feel. So those are seventh chords. That's why they're seventh chords. The seventh note of its scale is flattened by a half step. So we'll get in future lessons into some other types of seventh chords. Major seventh chords are really nice, and then minor seventh chords are really nice. And we'll do some examples of those. But hopefully that's helpful in showing you some things about the seventh chord. So keep jamming. Hope all is well.